All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to our conversation today. My name is Christina Bain and I am the co-founder with Jennifer Nassour of the Pocketbook Project. And we're so excited to have you join us for our ongoing conversation about campaigning during the time of COVID. And today's topic is fundraising. To tell you a bit about the Pocketbook Project, we are an organization dedicated to training center-right women and the next generation of leaders, particularly in the New England area, which is our focus region. And our aim is to really create lasting trainings and again provide those skill sets to really get a new generation of leaders to the table. And we're so excited to have you with us today. And I want to now welcome Peyton Gumas, who is our incredible program manager, and she is going to be moderating the session today. And we are recording, so you'll be able to access this later for those who are attending right now. And we have a great conversation ahead. We have two wonderful experts who are going to give all their knowledge and information to us. So with that, Peyton.
All right, so we have Matt and Teresa today. Matt has experience with consulting. He's the president of the Keswick Consulting in Boston. He's worked many years in government relations and has a business development firm that's dedicated to helping organizations achieve maximum results when pursuing public policy objectives. He has lots and lots of fundraising experience, years and years. He actually recently found out that Teresa and Matt have worked together before, so that was really great. And Teresa brings over 25 years of experience in executive search. She currently serves as a partner with the KLR Executive Search Group, a boutique executive search firm that specializes in recruiting. She actually is a part of our Pocketbook Project. She is on our executive board along with Matt. She is our treasurer. And they both bring a large amount of fundraising background. I will ask both of you to kind of introduce what your background in fundraising has been. So whoever would like to kick it off.
Matt, would you like to go first?
Sure, thank you. Thanks for the great intro, and Christina, you as well. It's great to be here helping out the Pocket Project and all you folks out in Webland listening to us and hopefully learning a little bit about fundraising. I am not a professional fundraiser, which I think actually makes me somewhat more qualified to offer advice to first-time candidates and folks looking to run for office. It's definitely a challenge of raising money, but it's also become one of those passions that I've developed in the past, 20 years, 25 years, starting like right after college, first job out, working on a campaign, then basically honing those skills. And fortunately or unfortunately, once you do one fundraiser, there's always another one, and another one, and another one. And every one of my fundraisers has always been my last. But I've been able to kind of develop some kind of coaching skills for folks, for candidates, for campaigns, and for others that basically need help. So I worked at statewide, I worked for federal, I worked for local, I worked for national candidates. Basically tried to help guide them, not necessarily in the fundraising aspect of it, of raising money from a yearly cycle, but more of setting up an organization, developing the ask of the ask, and basically figuring out ways that you can say, I don't have a network, I don't know people, I can't raise money, and getting you to that next step.
Great, thanks, Matt. So my background is, I look at it, I'm always been on the other side of the house. So once we raise the money, what happens with the money? So earlier in my career, I was the chief of staff for Mitt Romney when he ran for US Senate against Ted Kennedy. And I was in charge of all the money, all the reporting, all the compliance, and the hiring of the staff. And now, as Peyton said, I'm the treasurer of Pocketbook, which is something I was looking forward to doing. And previously, I was Beth Lindstrom's treasurer when she ran for Senate. So that was a very big campaign as well that I worked on. So my background, as I said, is mostly on the compliance side and the reporting side. I am not an accountant by background, but I have certainly learned a lot about it. And I also am the treasurer of a number of other nonprofits in my town where I live.
Really great. So the next question is going to be about how easily you can actually ask for money, whether or not it is, should you ask flat out what is better, or should your conversation focus on something else? Where could you lean with other people? What those connections can do for you.
Do you want me to take that one, or Teresa, we both jump in on this?
You can take that one.
All right, perfect. So is the question the ask of the ask or the ask of the ask?
Essentially, yeah.
So a lot of people are afraid to ask for money, and if you're running for office, you can't be. Unfortunately, one of the things that pays for printing, pays for postage, pays for commercials, pays for staff, pays for everything is money. So it's a big part of the campaign. It's probably something that a lot of people don't think of up front when they're running. They might think about lawn signs and standouts and commercials and giving speeches to crowds and things like that. But to get there, you need money. And I will say, if you're going to raise money, you can't be afraid to ask. You can't be afraid to, hit up your friends, hit up your enemies, basically hit up anybody. I would say that it is difficult. And one of the reasons why it's difficult is nobody wants help. Everyone wants to do everything on their own. And a campaign is not about one person. It's about a team and building a team. So how do you get there? You get there through fundraising. I am a little reluctant the first time I meet somebody or the first time I ask them for money, I usually give a little bit of a soft pitch. I'm running for office. This is not me, but telling candidates do this. I'm running for office. I'd love your advice. I'd love, your strategy. I'd love your ideas. Anything you can do to help me out. That's the first initial meeting, the first initial phone call, the first coffee with a person and whatnot. And then it's building up that list of 10 people, 20 people that you met with, had conversations, had cocktails, had coffee with, and then asking them, once they get comfortable with you, what you're about, what your campaign's about, what the office you're running is about. So I would say the ask has to come after an initial introduction. And it could be somebody you already know who wants to write a check right on the spot. That's gravy. That's great. That's extra. But, in a true, fundraising standpoint, you have to get to know the person, but the person also needs to get to know what you're doing. They may know you as a mom. They may know you as a neighbor. They may know you as a friend, but it's a different hat you're wearing when you're running for office.
So follow-up is, while we haven't been able to have in-person events for over a year, we can connect with people anywhere in the world, just as we are obviously now on Zoom. Has the rise of video conferencing events made it easier or harder to fundraise?
It's a great question. And, Zoom and Facebook and all these great tools are awesome to connect people. I don't think they've replaced the personal touch, the personal ask, the handshake, the hug, all those things that you really need to do in fundraising. The socialization of going to, a cocktail party or going to somebody's house and meeting your neighbors and friends, that has been very, very difficult to replicate. However, more people are around and more people are willing to actually do video conferencing instead of a phone call. So the phone call, the person can kind of blow you off. I think with video conferencing, if you're looking at them, you're talking at them, you have a little more of an opportunity to engage with them versus just a cold call of calling somebody. So that has been positive. The other part of it too is that if you do out-of-state fundraising, let's say that you went to college somewhere else, you're running for office here in Massachusetts, and you want to connect with your friends from New York or California, whatever else, you don't have to fly to meet them to ask them for money. They don't have to come see you. You can do this virtually. So it's kind of opened up new fundraising circles, new pockets, new opportunities that you can leverage. So that's been good. But I will say, and maybe I'm a traditionalist, that I still like paper mail fundraising wise versus electronic mail. And I still like face-to-face activities. And, as a donor and an advisor to folks who raise money, we'll try to get them to shy away as much as possible from Zoom, but it's the reality. We have to embrace it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think that it's so helpful to have people face to face instead of Zoom. Do you have any other advice for fundraising, something that's more open to, it doesn't have to do with Zoom or COVID, but something that basic advice that everyone should know about fundraising?
Yeah, a couple of things. I'm reminded of a story about when Barack Obama came to Massachusetts to campaign for Deval Patrick, who was running for governor or running for re-election, that Air Force One had landed at the airport, and Governor Patrick greeted him at the bottom of the stairs. They were in the limo together, and the governor said to Barack, President Obama, I hate raising money. I hate talking about myself. I hate promoting myself. And Obama said to him, get over yourself. That's one of the things that you need to do, is you need to shift yourself into that position of, I'm just as equal as the attorney general, as the governor, as the state rep, as the state senator. They started somewhere, I started somewhere else, but we're going for the same office, we're going for the same position. So just having that stature and having that confidence to be able to do that, that's what I think a lot of folks need to get over. And they usually get there, but it might be September before November election. So having that confidence and having the ask of the ask, the gift of the ask, the willingness to ask is a lot of part of it. So it's more kind of human nature than anything else, than actually a skill. The other thing I will add to this is one of my strategies that I'll sit down with any candidate running for office is they'll say, who do I call? And they think that there's a magical list out there that they can just call and ask Peyton for money, ask Christina for money, and Teresa for money, and it's just going to appear. And it's like, who is this candidate? Who are you? You haven't told your story. So it's going to start with your own network, and raising money with your own network establishes credibility. That puts you on the map. That all of a sudden people are like, whoa, they've got a significant amount of money in the bank, or they actually know what they're doing. So that is a significant part of it. But where do you get it from? If you think about your life has different chapters in it. You get your high school friends, then you go to college, then you get your first job, professional friends. If you go to grad school, if you go to law school, you've got circles of friends. Then you start having kids, and you start meeting other parents on the playground or on the soccer field, and then your neighbors, your friends, and then of course your family too. So if you think about it, I call them bubbles or circles. You have like 10 bubbles or circles in your life. You just got to go back to each one to tap those, and you'll be surprised at how many people you actually know versus saying, I don't know people, or they won't donate to me. And then of course, the broad-based blast of social media is helpful for awareness, but it's not an ask. If somebody puts something out there, please donate to me, it's not really an ask. It's basically, well, that was a commercial, but it doesn't mean I'm going to buy it. So it creates awareness, but it doesn't actually replace the ask. The famous, quotes about, you need to ask for my vote. That's exactly what you need to do with dollars.
Teresa, do you have any advice?
The only thing that I would say is that when you're doing fundraising, it usually comes in, it depends upon the size of the campaign, but it comes in different ways. It's going to come in from direct mail. It's going to come in from your lower type donors. It's going to come in from events. It's going to come in from your big donors. So you always want to have a mechanism in place to really capture these names, because you're going to have to for reporting purposes too. And then you want to be able to judge your fundraising by, what's the response you got from this group or that group or this mailing. So I think the tracking of where the money's coming from is also very important. And that all sort of goes into the next phase of the money, tracking the money in the compliance side of the house.
So we're going to move towards focusing on the compliance and reporting part of political fundraising. As I mentioned earlier, we have you, Teresa, who is the pocketbook treasurer. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what experience you have in compliance specifically?
So I think when you are starting a campaign, what the most important person other than your campaign manager is your treasurer. So you have to have someone that you trust implicitly, right? Because this is your money, and sometimes you get money that comes in cash, and there's that whole aspect of it. So you want to make sure the person is trustworthy. Of the campaigns and all the campaigns I've been on or worked on and served on, you don't want it to be a family member who's your treasurer. you want to keep that sort of separate, and you never really want a candidate to have signing authority on the checks. There are times, depending upon the campaign, where that may happen, but I would advise that it remains completely separate. Depending upon the size of the campaign, you might want to have an assistant treasurer, just because if someone can't get a hold of me and Christina needs a check signed today or tomorrow and she can't get me, at least you have another person. So I always recommend, depending on the size of the campaign, that there are two people who are signatories on the accounts. And then in setting up the tracking for a basic campaign, Excel is fine. For a more complicated Senate campaign or gubernatorial campaign, I think that you need to really look at having a QuickBook or some sort of more formal tracking where you can produce reports that you need to, especially when you have to report to the state or on the federal level. So that's sort of the reporting of the packages that I would use on that. I think that the other thing is, with smaller campaigns, there's something called D&O insurance, directors and officers insurance. Now, in a smaller campaign, you can't afford that, number one, and you don't really have a board that you quote unquote have to take care of. But like on the Beth Lindstrom for Senate campaign, we did have D&O insurance because it was a significant amount of money, and Beth wanted to ensure that everybody was covered should anything go wrong. So we did go through the process of getting that. And I will tell you, to get that for a campaign is very, very difficult. You have to really produce a lot of documentations, et cetera. So that's just another aspect, but that's usually for a more larger campaign. Choosing your bank is important too. And the reason I say that, if it's a local candidate, just a statewide candidate or statewide officer, you're running for a state rep, you probably want to have a bank in your backyard that reflects the community that you serve. So that's important too. On a national campaign, it's better to have a much larger bank that you have access to lock boxes and anything you need to collect money. So I think choosing a bank is always a very important thing too. And then the other thing that I would say, that there are companies out there that will help you do your reporting. So for statewide campaigns, you have to, every state is different, but like in Massachusetts, it's the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, where you have reporting requirements there. And if it's a national, like a Senate race or a presidential race, you have to report to the, oh my God, I can't believe I can't remember it, but the big federal, Matt, what's the name of that? I can't, the Federal Election Commission, the Federal Election Commission, and
FEC, yeah.
FEC, the Federal Election Commission, and those reports are very cumbersome and very tedious. And they're, in the old days, we used to do those by hand. Everything was done by hand, but now it's much more automated. So, but there are specific deadlines of when those reports have to be filed that you have to comply with, and you get all that information when you set up everything that you do. And then the only last thing I would say is, a lot of campaigns incorporate just for protection of everybody involved in the campaign. So that's another thing to think about. I mean, probably not for a smaller state rep campaign, but the bigger it goes, a gubernatorial or senator, those campaigns probably would incorporate. So that's what I'd say on that.
The one thing I would add, or not one thing, is probably more I would add, but it can be overwhelming, starting. This is like your first day or first week, or contemplating running this, and you've got all these compliance thoughts in your heads that I can't speak for every state, but we've got a pretty robust office here in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Office of Campaign Political Finance, also known as OCPF. They do trainings, they have webinars. They actually have a reporter tool out there. So there's a lot of things that are, at your fingertips that your state regulator can put out there. They used to do in-person trainings. I'd assume that a lot of it's online right now, but I would not feel the obligation to hire a consultant immediately until you kind of start lining things up. And then when you know what you're doing, if you need the additional help, do it, but don't add the expense up front because with the web reporter piece for the lower offices like state rep and things like that, a lot of the tools are free. You just need to be able to use them.
Yeah, I would agree.
All those OCPF trainings that Matt just mentioned are all free, which is really great.
And the thing is, oftentimes, it doesn't change year to year. A lot of this reporting, it's very, very consistent for the most part. And when they do make a change, it's readily put out that there is a change in reporting or scheduling, however. So it's pretty consistent both on the state and the federal level, I found.
So Teresa, you hit a lot of my questions that I had like right on the head. My only other one that I would probably ask is what type of person should you find to be your treasurer, and do they need to have an accounting or finance background at all?
I think it has to be someone who has, number one, the time, because it's always more time than you think it's going to be. And I think it has to be someone, you don't have to be an accountant, but you have to sort of understand, you have to be good with numbers, and you have to be good with deadlines and the reporting piece of it too. And you can't be afraid to say to the candidate, you know, I'm in over my head here, you know, what resources are available to me to do this? Because oftentimes, like for the Pocketbook Project, for example, we have an outside accountant who just advises and prepares our 990 and does our any of our 1099s that we need to do for our employees or whatever. So I think that's something to think about too, that the candidate could have a relationship with their accountant who maybe could help or whatever.
Yeah, so for the most part, those were all of my questions, but we have so many to look at. So one of them is, what is the most innovative idea or mechanism you've seen for fundraising during COVID-19? And do you think this type of innovation will continue post-pandemic?
On the innovation front, I don't know if I call it innovation. I think it was, more by necessity than anything else. But obviously, the virtual kind of fundraising type thing has been, probably become the new norm. I wouldn't call it, like I said, innovative or things like that. It probably accelerated the fundraising world by, a couple of years. We weren't ready to do this in the past, but because of COVID, we were forced to do that. I think it's here to stay, but I think people need to be careful about fatigue. If I'm on webinars and Zoom from 9 to 5, and then I have a 6 o'clock or 6:30, event, it's just easier to say no because your eyes are tired and things like that. So I think that's one of the things to, kind of be careful about. Honestly, the best thing that somebody can do in the fundraising front is to pick up the phone or to email somebody and call them, get in touch with them and have a personal conversation, a personal dialogue, building that relationship and letting them know where they are, what they're doing, and how they're going to do it. And, the virtual stuff, like I said, is great, but that's more broad-based. The personal touch, getting in front of somebody, if it's in person or on the phone or virtually, is, I think, the most important thing.
How do you maintain and engage your list post campaigning in between campaigns, and what is your advice?
Do you want me to grab that one, or?
You can grab it, and I'll put my 2 cents in too. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a great question, because sometimes the first time you run, you don't win, and sometimes you do win. And I think the answer at the end of the day, is engagement. If you were close and you want to run again, you need to keep those things warm. You need to keep those people close to you. You need to keep them engaged. You need to keep them active. And similarly, if you win, you're the day you get elected, your re-election campaign starts. You need to keep those folks close to you. There are certain, I don't know, tips, tricks, or cheats to do it. But, the big thing is asking somebody for advice is great. Asking somebody for money can be more difficult. But asking somebody how they are or how they're feeling is a very personal thing, which keeps folks engaged. So it might be nice to call your finance committee or your top fundraisers and just say, how are you? How's your family? How are the kids doing in school? Not asking them anything else, but just wondering how they're doing. Just a check-in, a personal touch. And then, of course, there are different opportunities. Christmas, usually the end of a campaign, Thanksgiving at the end of a campaign, an opportunity to send out a New Year's card, to engage them that way by, sending them a note. But the most important thing is, and like I said, it's a great question of keeping those contacts warm and keeping them engaged, and knowing that, you know, it's a personal relationship. It's not one dimensional. Give me money, I need to run for office. It can't be like that.
And I was going to say the same thing that Matt said, just about in terms of doing it. But also the other thing too is, if you're running for state rep and you know another state rep and or what have you, oftentimes people share their lists, and that's another way of starting to build your list. So I think when you first decide you're going to run and you look at who you know, or you're being encouraged to run by someone, you know, you should ask, because most times most people will share their lists, especially at the lower levels. When it comes up to the bigger senatorial, that becomes more complicated. But I think that's another avenue to explore too.
The next one that we have is do you have ideas for database services to maintain your contact lists and correspondence, i.e. newsletters, direct mail, etc. for fundraising? We did just point off sending letters out to everyone who you have for your contact, but.
Well, I think the lowest hanging fruit is the, you know, Microsoft suite of having, you know, Outlook to do personalized emails. I think you can do mail merges as well too. You know, using Excel and using Microsoft Word. As you get a little more mature and you're not sending out, you know, handwritten or hand typed letters, obviously, you know, constant contact and, you know, a lot of those e-blast services, I can't really comment on which one's better than the other, but there's differences that you may get more bells and whistles, but it may be more expensive. So I think you need to evaluate on the size and scope of your campaign and how much budget you want to put into those tools. But it's definitely something to look into. And additionally, on the reporting stuff, you know, we talked about, you know, the statewide campaign dynamic, where you could have thousands of donors versus, you know, dozens or hundreds of donors in the local thing. You definitely want to make sure that you are investing in a tool which is leverageable, meaning you can get your data out of it if you decide to move on. A lot of the times, if you buy into a database system, they want you to pay every month, even if you're not using it. So you want to make sure that you do have access to that.
And back towards a little bit of the compliance, there was another question where how important it is to a campaign.
I would say it's everything, because if you're not in compliance and you fill out things wrong or what have you, you're going to get fined, and those fines are very steep. And the higher office you go to, the higher the fines are. So it's very, very important that, you know, you dot all your I's and cross all your T's, because it can come back to haunt you. And on the federal level, the Federal Election Commission, when they find errors in your thing, they'll send it back to you and say, okay, these are all wrong, fix it, and you do an amended report. So you have a chance to make amends for it, but they give you one shot on that. After that, you know, you're going to start getting fined if things aren't correct.
The other thing I'd add too, and getting back to, you know, OCPF, our regulator here, and even the FEC, that there's an opportunity to get to know these folks. That, like I said, the trainings used to be in person, so you go up there and you could actually meet, you know, who your auditor was or things like that. A lot of the times they'll have a question line open from like 9 to 5 that you can call up and ask questions. And I think it's better to ask a question instead of just doing it and assuming something and then getting fined or getting a letter, you know, for a correction or things like that. So they definitely, you know, provide access for assistance and for help. And I think it's worthwhile for any campaign treasurer or a candidate or campaign manager to access that.
Mm-hmm. And it's always better to ask for forgiveness. You know, if you've made the full faith effort, you've tried your best, and they know that you have, if you've been in contact with them, then you're usually fine, because they know that you're trying. And oftentimes they could be like a person like me who really isn't an accountant and steeped in all the rules on that. So you usually, you want to build your relationship with those regulators.
Yeah. And the circles or the bubbles that you were talking about, Matt, when you're reaching out to them, what is the most appropriate, or what can be the most appropriate amount to ask for?
That's another great question. And, you know, through, my life, I've, know people that are $5 donors, and that's a lot to them. And I've known people that are $5,000 donors, and that's not a lot to them. So it's kind of just knowing your audience. And we've got, our $20 friends and our, $2,000 friends. So a lot of it is just kind of assuming where people are, comfort level wise. And one of the interesting things is there's a difference between the ability to give and the actual giving. So there's some folks out there that might have more money than anybody, but they're just reluctant to either donate to political campaigns or to, open up their checkbook at all. And there are other folks out there that you'd be surprised that, they may not, have a ton of income, but they're willing to give over and above what you would expect. So a lot of it is, kind of being able to pivot and be on your toes, but also being realistic too about where people are in life, depending on, what the demographics are, or even how many kids they have.
To follow up with that, how important is the personal handwritten note and thanking for donations? And when do you do this now, given with the focus on email and digital things like Zoom?
I can't emphasize this enough, and I know people don't like doing this, and it takes up time and it takes up effort and energy. But to me, when I open up my snail mail and go through what the postman brought me, it is so impressive to see a handwritten card, a handwritten thank you note versus 400 emails I get a day, which you don't even know if the person whose name's on it actually sent it, who's behind it, if it was a mail merge, if it was generic, whatever else. So I think that when somebody writes, dear Matt, thank you, and asks, how my wife is doing or how my son is doing, just that personal touch goes a long way. That incentivized me to give again. I'm knowing that the person actually cares about me and they've taken that opportunity of engagement. And, in all honesty, buy a smaller cards, they have less words to write, but as long as your name is on there, a thank you is on there, and, something personal about, your family, or hope to get together in the summer, or hope to see you soon. Things like that go a long, long way. I've actually held on to Teresa in 1994. Mitt Romney wrote me a personal thank you note for work on the campaign. I actually keep it in my drawer.
Yeah, I think it depends upon the size of the campaign too. So if you're running for a state rep, you may go, the threshold may be $50 or $100 where you do a handwritten note. If you're running a larger campaign, it may be $500 and above. It all depends upon what the candidate feels that they want to do, I would say.
And I think you had another question in there too about when to do it. My answer would be immediately. If you can't do it immediately, before your next ask.
Yeah. And what we've done in the campaigns that I've worked on, that was a weekly thing, that those would have to go out on a weekly thing, and that would be something that I would be marching around, making sure that those notes went out. So it's very, very important.
So our next one is focusing more on the share and buying donor lists. So now there is such a trend to share and buy donor lists. Can you share your advice on when and what lists to buy? How do data privacy laws play into this, given that some donors are now fearful of having their donations public?
That's an interesting question. So I'm going to talk about it from the big candidate perspective, like the Senate races and those. When you have a big race like that, you're using a mail house to do your mailings, and along with the person who's heading up fundraising for the campaign, you choose the lists that you're going to buy for the campaign. So depending upon where you're targeting, what group you're looking at, where do you think you're going to get money for this issue or this issue. So you choose that and you pay depending upon what kind of list that is. But the nice thing about it is, as you build your list and you get money from these various lists that we'll call them, you're renting these lists, right? Then you're going to start developing your own list for people who respond. Eventually, candidates can sell that list to other candidates. Like, it could be the Teresa Arendt for Senate campaign list that I own now. The campaign's over. but I still have access to this list through the direct mail house. And Matt's campaign may say, you know what? Oh, Teresa's list was really good for really conservative donors for, I don't know, Northern Massachusetts. So I'm going to buy that list. And he'll just work with the mail house to do that. So that's sort of how it works on a very large campaign.
Do you have any comments on that, Matt, or?
That's right. I think, the renting is kind of an interesting way of trying to grow your donor base. I do know that, the information is public through the FEC's website at the federal level and through the state, Massachusetts at OCPF. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you can also steal people's donors as well. So that's just one thing to be careful of.
Mm-hmm.
And to follow up, how do you assure donors in this charged political climate about giving to political campaigns? What is your advice on any talking points or sort of coaxing them into talking about how they feel?
I'm not sure I get the question.
It's just talking about how politically charged our climate is currently, and how to assure donors that, sorry, I'm reading this wrong. How do you assure donors in this charged political environment about giving to political campaigns? It's the follow-up for the donator list that we just talked about.
I'll pass on to Teresa while I work on my answer.
I don't know how I would answer that question. So, it just
us on that one.
Yeah, I think I don't know how I would answer that question.
I think it's more about the public piece, because I think right now how donors are feeling in general, and I've dealt with this before, I dealt with it this cycle, everyone, because whether they work in a certain place where they're fearful of their political beliefs coming out, depending on what party the candidate is, and that they've given to a certain candidate for this political cause. And obviously we do have these laws where, donations are public depending on the mechanism of how you give money. How do you assure donors that and especially given, the last election cycle, which was so volatile, how do you make them comfortable with giving? I think that's what the question is getting at.
I don't know if there's anything you can do, but one of the things to let people know is that it is public information. In Massachusetts, if you donate to a state candidate, above $200, you actually have to disclose their occupation and job. So there's even more information out there, and obviously there's reasons to do that for compliance purposes. But I live in Milton, Massachusetts here, and our local newspaper during the Trump campaign or during Obama's campaign will have a map, like a heat map of like how many people in the town donated, how much they gave, things like that. So, I guess transparency and privacy are two different issues.
Yeah, because I mean, anybody could go to OCPF and pull the last report for, Teresa Aaron for governor and see who gave. And the same thing for Federal Election Commission. You can see when you file the reports, those become public documents. So anybody can look at those.
It's also a way to pick up a new donor that somebody down the street from you, down the block from you might not even know has similar beliefs or, donates to similar candidates. And you can add them to your list too. So, I would look at the benefit of that as well.
Okay.
Did we work through all the questions, or are they still coming in?
Yeah, I'm just checking to make sure if we have any other ones really quickly. So sorry. One
of the things I just like to add out there too is we've talked a lot about the compliance piece, and I think it can be overwhelming. And even the debate of I wouldn't hire an attorney up front, but I would have access to one in case something goes wrong. You want to have somebody in the stable in case there is an issue. 99% of the time, you don't need one, but that 1% of the time you want to be prepared. But it's also defining roles, and they always aren't clear, but just understanding of where the candidate starts and stops, where the campaign manager role starts and stops, where the fundraiser role starts and stops, and then where the treasurer's role starts and stops. There's a little bit of overlap in all of them, but the candidate can't be doing the compliance and vice versa. So I think a lot of that needs to be vetted around the kitchen table when you're starting your campaign. And additionally, on the treasurer thing, that I've known people that have been treasurers to campaigns, and they kind of walk around with like a name tag on, like, I'm the treasurer to this campaign. They wear it as kind of more of a title than actually like a legal title that has been given to them because they're in charge of compliance. They have to sign off on all the candidates' reports. And if somebody is going to get a letter from a regulator, it's going to go to them. So just knowing the seriousness of it, it's not, you put your best college roommate in that role because you like them or you want to give them a title. It's more that that person's going to serve you well and going to, be able to basically watch your back.
And oftentimes, just to follow another thought I had too, on some campaigns, Matt could have the title of treasurer, as he was saying, and I'm doing all the work. I'm not the treasurer. I'm like in the back office doing the work. And I've been on campaigns where that's been the case too, where I did all the work, but Matt's actually signing signing off on anything that we have to report. So in that instance, those two people, or however many people are in that, those two people have to have a big connection, because oftentimes if it's set up like that, that treasurer, Matt, probably isn't reviewing. He's trusting that I've done everything. So there's that too that happens a lot.
Yeah, and we just had one more question pop through. What is the biggest shift in fundraising strategies you've seen since you began in politics?
I don't know if I'm a dinosaur or whatnot, but I would say the online piece.
Mm-hmm.
Before it was via phone and snail mail, which still is one of the more effective ones. But the fact that you could put a web video out there and make an e-request, and even receiving funds electronically. Before, you had to wait a week for the check to come in, and a lot of times campaigns will actually have a PO box. Somebody's going to drive to the post office, but only between 8 and 4 when the post office open. So the advent of that, and then even up until a few years ago, you couldn't pay with a credit card. And that makes it a lot more difficult. That if I call you and say, will you donate to my campaign, I can send you a web link, and then 30 seconds later you can click back and I've already received the funds. So the speed of doing it, I think, is definitely increased with the digital piece. And I'm not overhyping digital fundraising, but it's more the tools that help you raise the funds than the actual device of raising the funds. That if you have the ability to take credit cards online or use PayPal or whatever you want for a platform, you can receive funds faster. You can also communicate with folks faster as well. And that up until, I don't know, put a number on it, the Romney campaign in 1994 certainly wasn't doing that, right?
No. It was all phone, and it was direct mail. No, in events, that was it.
To follow up that, do you think direct mail has been more effective in the last election cycle, given that travel was limited / more people were paying attention to the mail for most people due to COVID, since people were home?
Couldn't even take a stab at that. It's just,
I would kind of say yes. I would think so, because more people had more time to read your mail, right? You were probably excited. That was like the biggest part of your day when the mail came, right? At least in those first couple of months, which sort of was around the campaign. So I would say, yeah, probably. That would be an interesting thing to look at, I think.
I agree.
All right. Well, I don't think we have any more questions. I just wanted to thank you both for coming today. We loved hearing from everyone. You guys had a great conversation, so thank you so much for that. If anyone else has any other questions, feel free to reach out to the Pocketbook Project online. We're more than happy to take any questions or emails. Any more thoughts?
Just like to thank all of you for inviting me, letting me share some hopefully wisdom with you, and wish all of you considering running for office the best of luck and continued success with the Pocketbook Project.
I would echo that. Thank you very much for having us, and it's a wild ride if you decide to do it, so enjoy every minute of it, because there's nothing like it, and you're going to meet a ton of people, and it's gonna change your life. So it's a good thing. So good luck.
Thank you so much to everyone for joining today. We're thrilled to have you, and we hope you tune in next time to our next edition of our webinar series. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.